Charter Local Edition with your host, John McDonald.
Welcome. I'm visiting today with John Engen, who's the mayor of Missoula, Montana, my hometown. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, John. Thanks for acknowledging Missoula as your hometown.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. So I wanted to visit with you a little bit and talk about some of the economic development initiatives and things that are going on in Missoula.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that. So we've had a bit of a building boom in Missoula, post-recession. It's really remarkable. I've lived in Missoula all my life. And what we're seeing today is a lot of, I think, policy and practice sort of meet. We've talked about taking advantage of infrastructure in the urban core. We've talked about our transportation systems. We've talked about roads. We've talked about wastewater. We've talked about water, which we may talk a little bit more about as our conversation ensues today. But folks are taking advantage of what we have to offer in terms of the built environment. So we've got a lot of multifamily development going on, which means we've got a lot of new places for people to live, which is critical in our community. And we've got a lot of new retail, new commercial. That's good for someone who is in my business, which is largely about tax base and community development. So that stuff is all going really well. And we're attracting folks who can work anywhere and choose to work in a place that's beautiful, that's interesting, and that's still a place. So this long-term vision of placemaking is actually paying off.
Right, and the community is growing quite rapidly too.
Well, the community tends to grow. I mean, it feels rapid. It's it's 1.5%, 2% a year, very manageable, and we think that that's a growth rate that is largely acceptable to the community. Too much growth too fast can create lots of problems. We're sort of steady Eddie, and we like it that way.
In the infrastructure arena, and you mentioned water, you have been for quite a while now in a legal case involving your water system. Talk a little bit about where that's at now.
Right, so we, as the only municipality in the state of Montana that does not own its water system, of 129 cities and towns in Montana, we're the only one that doesn't own its water system. We have engaged in a legal battle with the Carlyle Group, which is a global investment entity for local control of the water system. We won the first phase of a multi-phase trial. That is, we won the eminent domain portion of this case, which means we in effect have ownership. Now it's a question of what we'll pay for it. So we're moving into the valuation phase of that question, and that'll happen in November. We continue to believe that we'll be in a position to buy the system and to operate it for a very long time in the best interests of the folks we serve.
And what's the expected time frame on that? You said this will begin in November. How long do you think it'll be before it's fully resolved?
Well, if I were in the business of prognosticating how long lawsuits would last, I could probably retire if I were successful. It's really hard to know. We think this is a months-long question rather than a years-long question. Next phase happens in November. An appeal phase in front of a jury could happen in January.
Okay. One of the things too in Missoula that's been happening is the city has looked at a lot of different ideas about economic development, and a couple of things are going on there. One involves the Fort Missoula historical area, trail systems and things like that. Talk a little bit about that initiative and what Missoula is doing when it comes to kind of that idea of how trails and that type of thing can be used for economic development.
So fundamentally what we've discovered is that parks, trails, recreational facilities, the natural environment, that stuff isn't just a bell or a whistle or an amenity. That stuff is fundamental to a growing, strong, healthy community. And what we find is that entrepreneurs, that students, that business folks, that laborers, that big brains all want to live in places where those facilities exist, where they're growing, where they're improving. And so we've made an investment as a community most recently through a $38 million bond in the case of Fort Missoula Regional Park to create roughly 300 acres of new recreational space. So we've got fabulous soccer fields. We've got a rugby pitch. We've got places for people to play pickleball, which sounds extraordinarily dangerous to me, and I won't participate in any way, but apparently people do. We've also, as part of that bond, we've got trails to invest in throughout Missoula County. People love them. They are willing to not only pay for them, but they're interested in expanding them, they're interested in maintaining them, and they are absolutely interested in using them. So again, this back to this notion of placemaking. You make an excellent place, you invest in an excellent place, and people will come there and want to do business there, want to live there, want to play there, want to make a life there.
Right. Sounds like a unique approach that Missoula is using.
Well, we're often known for our unique approach.
Let me ask one of the questions I've been asking folks. You're at the League of Cities and Towns meeting, and this is a real good opportunity to visit with your colleagues and kind of talk about the issues that are facing communities in Montana. Looking forward for the next year or two, what do you see as a key issue that communities are going to have to focus on?
So challenges are always scalable, so it matters not whether you're a small town or one of the larger cities in the state. We're always facing challenges around revenue. How do we pay for the basic infrastructure that makes our existence possible in cities and towns? And we have a couple of fundamental methods today. Property taxes and our entitlement share from the state, and what the cities and towns will continue to face is how do we figure out new sources of revenue. There will be a point at which we're just not going to be able to rely on residential property taxes to make this system work. So we need to keep looking at those revenue challenges, and I think that's a lot of what the League is interested in,
right,
is making sure that citizens, the folks who live here day in and day out, aren't paying the whole bill for the many people who enjoy all that Montana has to offer.
Right. Well, Mayor, I appreciate you taking a little time to visit with us today. I've got a new Google search, pickleball. Haven't heard of that one before. We've been visiting with
Make
Mayor.
sure you spell it right.
Yeah, we've been visiting with Mayor John Engen of Missoula. Mayor, appreciate you spending some time.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Good to see you. Take care.
Charter Local Edition has been an exclusive presentation of Charter Communications, providing original programming.